Hey everybody, and welcome to another dev video. Now this is probably going to take the replacement for today's stream simply because I haven't slept in 2 days, inverted my sleep schedule, have a bit of back pain, and am pretty much doped up because of said back pain. So we're kind of just going to roll with this. Stream or no stream might happen today, but this will work. So today's objective for this video is we're going to continue to work on this little side project that I made yesterday. I put a tweet out basically saying I'm bored and I want to make a missile that shoots swords. Now, of course, the original tweet said I needed to curse my boredom. Now, this has basically turned into a slight curse because not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Now, of course, I did get the missile to shoot swords without much effort at all. And as you can see, I've also crashed the game again. But in rendering the swords, they looked pretty much like shit. I rendered two 2D planes, and I thought I could get away with that. And it kind of works. I mean, you could kind of do things, but... why did that... Oh, I know why that broke. So, rendered 2D planes, which, I mean... there's a video that I released before this one that it looks half decent. Well, as long as you look at it from a certain angle, it looks half decent. There's a lot more work that would have needed to be done to get the 2D planes to look nice, so I just decided because I need this to render pretty much anything, we're going to actually build up a proper render code. That way I can render any item or block. And this will actually lead to more things than just a sword. The sword was just an excuse to work on the system. This has been on the to-do list for probably a year now. After all, it's the reason why the new version of ICBM doesn't have anvil missiles, is I didn't want to render anvils. Now we actually can do that as soon as I fix whatever's wrong with this, which is that this is not public. The reality is I actually could fix my manager system so it doesn't actually care what that is, but feels like a lazy approach. So what you can do with reflection code is you can go, okay, I want to access this, and if it's private or protected, I can go, okay, now make it public. And that is something you can physically do with reflection. It's the reason why I call it black magic, is that you can do anything with it. You know what, I forgot to put this on a creative tab, but we're just going to run with it and see if NEI will pick it up. I think NEI will show it. One of the good things about actually having NEI in the workspace again is I can get away without having to do things. Because I really don't want this to show up on a creative tab. It is a debug item is what this is. So to add to everything, so the goal of course is to make the swords render. Well, I got the swords to render as items now. That was something I did here earlier, and I couldn't record that whole process because it was like 4 in the morning. I know it's 8 o'clock now, so you imagine like 4 hours have passed. I've been doing other things for that 4 hours, not just coding. But we got it to render, but it's not rendering quite correctly. There's some vibration in the render, some weird stuff happening. Effectively, what I'm trying to do to get it to render is to use the entity item. So I'm faking out an entity item, which we're also faking out a fragment render here. This is what we're going to use for testing. But the fragment render, which is normally designed to render block fragments, blaze rounds, and arrows, is now going to be able to render what is called a projectile. Now, a projectile is going to be any item. So it's pretty much a subtype that just covers everything. It's anything that is an item that wants to be like a projectile. So this is going to have extra rendering beyond an item. So there's going to be like cool things like having the sword point in the direction it's firing. So how an arrow points in the direction it's moving, we're going to have things like swords point in the direction they're moving. That way when it impales a zombie, it actually looks like it impales a zombie, not like it hits it with the hilt and then it goes through the zombie and you're like, why did the hilt go through the zombie? Even though that probably would work in real life, I want it to look nice. There's probably other things we're going to do with this to make it much nicer. There's going to be more types than just projectile. We're going to probably have fragmented projectile, which is going to be taking the item and breaking it up into pieces, in which we'll just randomize the UV and throw it around. That one's going to require some proper rendering. Instead of piggybacking the entity item render, what we'll do is when we get around to that one is we'll replace this with a custom solution. And then we'll borrow some code from probably the game engine I'm working on, and we'll do a fragment render with it. As the game engine I am working on is, I'm going to be implementing fragment rendering because I need when the entities die to break apart, especially if they die via weird things. So they're both use OpenGL, so I can borrow code. So that'll work. This is some other project. One other thing, I don't think I've actually showed this yet, so we'll go ahead and run this while I wait for Minecraft to launch. I built a application at the request of Lex here. Well, more or less I built it because I was bored and Lex just kind of wanted it. That would be this thing. It's a program that's designed to do something incredibly simple, and that's just process an FML log file. So what you can display how long your mod pack takes to load. In this case, is I think it's an FTB Ultimate pack that has been modified. I was actually helping somebody else debug their pack and figure out why ICBM wouldn't load. It turns out there was some weird bug with mechanism that was being caused by something having a janky furnace recipe that I ended up fixing by going through the entire furnace recipe list and removing anything broken. Now, I'm not sure if it's being caused by VoltsEngine or not, but every time you install VoltsEngine with mechanism, it happens. So there is something weird going on. I haven't figured it out yet, but I found a solution. Anyways, this pack takes basically almost 220 seconds to load. And this is designed to pretty much do that kind of time. It'll figure out how long everything takes to load, what parts, and it'll display it in a nice pretty graph over here, and you could do cool things like reload things. It's got some problems yet. This is the reason why I've actually only released as an alpha, is like if you remove the compression, which is supposed to show all of the mods. So what the compression system does is it actually breaks it down so that way anything that's under 1% is thrown in this other category. So that's all of your small mods. So anything that loads in under a second pretty much gets thrown in here. Then it just shows you the mods that take longer than a second to load. Like if we actually go down here, we can probably find one of them. It actually does tell you the load time of every single mod. So it took 13 seconds for DecoCraft to load, which is reasonable. DecoCraft has a ton of models. Oddly, I don't know why Mick Helicopter takes this long. One thing to point out with this, when I need to put this disclaimer on this tool when I'm done, this is not here to tell you what mods are good or bad, which ones have bad performance issues, because it's inconclusive. Like, we may find out Mick Heli has a long load time because it has a ridiculous amount of models as well, textures as well, which is reasonable. Larger mods take longer to load. You may look over here like mechanism, like why does it have a large load time? Is because it's all basic blocks. There's very few complex models in mechanism, and there's very few complex textures in mechanism. It's a really basic mod when you actually look at it. Ender IU has got about the same load time. It's a little larger mod than mechanism when it comes to detail. Same thing with Thaumcraft over here, but it's still interesting to see McKelly, that large on load time. Same for Java. I'm actually kind of confused about that. There might be something weird there. The thing is, we actually go down to Java and we can't actually see it there. But if we get out of this load time thing, I think there's actually a breakdown at the bottom. Oh, or I can accidentally misclick. Apparently I am missing a breakdown. So I'll have to add that to the system. Like when I'm looking for a breakdown, is like the console used to have this system in it where it would tell me what was the factor for each load time, because this load time you may only see like the total millisecond count, but this is broken down into 10 different sections. So there's actually, I think, 10 different events that get triggered, and I could see, is it the texture pack that's taking a while to load of DecoCraft, or is it's pre-init, post-init, phase, and everything else, recipe loading. You know what, that might be Java's maybe recipe loading. No, that doesn't make sense either. This, once again, this is, as a disclaimer, this is not designed to tell you what the performance of the mod. I would like to be able to do that in the future, but this doesn't actually hook into Forge in any way. It just reads a log file, which is what it's designed to do. It's a way to visualize a log file so you don't have to manually read a log file. And to show what I'm talking about for log files, I actually keep 2 test files in here. One is a 112 pack, which is really small. And if we pop this open, it reads this file. Now this is an actual FML output file. And what it is looking for, if I can find it somewhere down here, and not misclick, it's looking for these lines. And you see like baggable plants is in here. It's got intercoms communication is the action it's currently going through. And baggable plants doesn't do anything during that, so it's got a 0-second load time. But it's looking for these bar steps. Now a bar step is actually when you load Minecraft. You know, the thing that goes across it that goes, okay, I'm loading Forge or I'm loading so-and-so. Those bars that go across that loading screen, that's what it's doing. Somebody had the smart idea to put debug messages to tell you what's going on between those. And that's actually a great way to log this. It's a bit inconclusive. It's not going to give you the perfect timing because it's a GUI. So that if the GUI stalls out, then this actually could probably be longer. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't know how the inner working systems go. I just know this is what I was parsing out, and this is how we're looking for things. And it's meant to give you a general idea of which mods are causing your load time, so you know which mods to go look at, which ones not to look at. Like if a mod is taking less than a second to load, not even worth bothering. Unless you have like 1,000 mods, and then, well, you're in trouble. Anyways, let's go ahead and load this up and look at it. I'm going to go ahead and fire the explosive to show you guys what I'm talking about with the wobbling and the sword item effect. Now, one thing to note with the sword item effect, it's just rendering a flat item. It's very similar to the overlays that used to be part of the old resonant induction mod, where you would have a crate and you would have an overlay on it. That's basically the same render code it's using, so I mean they look like items. And if we fire that off, and we can see it when it actually runs. There's a bit of a performance problem, I think, from the particle spawning. That is an issue, but you see the swords just kind of fall. Might I note, when these do hit you, they do like ridiculous damage. I'm trying to decide if I need to balance them out or not. What they do is they take the sword damage, times it by velocity, so if the item is moving really, really quick when it hits you, it could literally instantly kill you. Which as I said, I'm trying to decide if I want to balance it, because that's legit. You're getting hit by the fragmentation from an explosion. In real life, even a small little, like, paperclip size fragment hits you, it'll go right through your skull and you're done. But yeah, those fragments disappeared rather quickly. Let's try that again. Try to decide like why they disappeared. But if you sit here and you look at these, they seem to wobble a little bit. Although I'm going to probably recode these to not disappear as quickly, because I kind of want the swords to stick around, but I think they have a really small lifetime span just because of frame rate and lag and everything. You can imagine that would kill your FPS really quickly. I'll work on it though, because I mean, it would be really cool to see a sword stick out of a wall after one of these explosions. I am probably going to drop the sword count too, because the ideal is that when you craft this explosion, you want to have like maybe only 4 swords per explosion, so that way that will balance out the high damage. I'll definitely work on it. Right now it's picking up the normal fragmentation, which I think is like 20 fragments per explosive tier, so it's a lot of fragments. So let's get rid of that, and we're going to go toy with the debug system. So we're looking for something called display. Right there it is. So go ahead and put this down. Now this has a tether attached to it, so it should be able to render, and it should render whenever I click on it. Let's see if that's actually gonna... You know what, that's not gonna work because I think I screwed up the... Yeah. This is meant to be a client-side, not server-side system. Let me also close this so I got some my data back. Try that again. I now have a sword in my face. Oddly, I can only see it in first person. It's clearly there. It's just like you go to the other view, it's gone. This is just a translation error. So we call render. Yeah, I see what's I see what I messed up on. So I was forgetting that I did not actually translate this already, so we want to make sure that translates on its own. There we go, that should work. Okay, so that's going to render down there, which it's not supposed to do. So I need to make this actually render on its own position, which is really strange when you actually sit here and you look at this, and it's you know, actually we're not gonna do that because I just realized that that's probably not gonna work. The position of your actual item and the position of your render are not the same. Just as a note, for those people like want to do renders and stuff, I just about made that mistake because after all I haven't slept in a while, so I'm a bit tired. I've taken some kind of sleeping aid tea. It's meant to make you go to sleep, and that's not even working. Okay, so this is what this actually looks like when it renders. If I throw a sword down there, that's pretty much roughly the scale. Now these two are running the same code, although we notice that there's a lighting problem with that. That is actually because of this block. I did not set it as opaque, so it's going to be lit wrong. Now I don't actually care about the lighting. The lighting is not a problem, because we know when we fire off the explosion, the sword's lit up just fine. The thing I need to fix is the rotation. Now this is set for 0, 0 rotation, so what I expect to see, and let me go ahead and do an example here, is the same behavior that a bow has. So if I fire a bow and it goes into the ground, you see it's going to share the rotation value of the way direction I was pointing. So some degree down, some rotation value. I want to see that same behavior out of this thing. So we're going to have to figure out what do we have to do to adjust it. Now it looks like by default I'm going to have to tilt it down by 90 degrees. As for yaw, I don't think I really need to mess with it too much, because even if the yaw is off, it would work. Because how would you know if the rotation yaw was correct? So let's just mess with the pitch. Of course, this is going to require me to actually go mess with this function, which I'm actually okay with. And it's this function that I think is what's wrong. I did copy this directly from my overlay render, or at least this piece from the overlay render. The rest of it was here beforehand. So I need to find... Okay, so we actually do have an arrow render, and I've actually documented this out really, really well. So I reverse engineered how the arrow renders. It's really, really basic. You render two sides of the shaft via basically quads, and then you render another 4 quads for the fence. So if we actually go look at the arrow which I shot, which has disappeared already, you can actually see this if I don't get too close. See that behavior, that there's pretty much just a 2D texture of two sides there. That gives the illusion, actually they're crossed in between each other, so they're crossed like a plus to look like a render. And then you got the fins on the back. There's 4 quads on the back that give it that definition, which when you stare at the back it looks much thicker than it really is, when the reality is when you rotate around here it is just a couple 2D textures. It's really smart when you think about it. It saves a lot of rendering time, because a 3D arrow would actually take longer to render than what they did with this. Same thing with the bow. The bow's kind of cool. I don't know how they actually do the 3D thing with that. I'm going to have to figure that out one of these days. I think they really just take and render a whole bunch of cubes, but I don't feel like that's actually how it works. We'll have to check, because I do want to do custom rendering for a lot of this stuff here later. So what we're looking for is this method here. We want to go ahead and rotate our item by this. We're going to have to do some factory, like you notice how on the yaw here they do a 90-degree reduction. A lot of the stuff I actually work with has that same 90-degree rotation in it. The missiles in particular are that way. But we do this right here, and I want to see if that would pick up correctly. Okay, so now you see we've got a bit of a different problem. Now it is rendering properly. So if we actually toss this out, or if I actually can drop it properly, that is correct. That's probably a 0-0 rotation. It's perfect. But we need to adjust it. So if we're wanting this to render like an arrow, which I'm not trying to decide if it should point straight up or point straight down. Let's go ahead and pull the explosive out real quick, and let's see how it looks. I'm going to grab one of the smaller ones too, just so that way we don't lag out. And this is supposed to render a golden sword, but I think I'm going to fire it. It's probably not. That's right, the rocket launcher's on this tab. I might add the rocket launcher to that tab just because I keep looking for it on that tab. Okay, so this points up. So we do need to invert it. We want to make sure it points down. And we're going to probably have a custom lookup table for this. So we're going to go, okay, if is sword, then we want to point down, because not all items are going to want to render well that way. So like if I'm using a quick booster as my item, so if I right click this in here, quick booster looks just fine rendered that way. But if we're rendering something like this, then of course we want to rotate that guy as well. So different items are going to want to be rotated different ways. Actually, I'm curious if it'll render the rocket launcher. It actually does. This is going to be a nice little display table for testing models and renders for pretty much everything. It'll be really cool, because it's going to use the item render system, which means I can sit there and I can play around with it. I might actually fake a player rendering with this too, so I can do all my item rotation adjustments on a fake player. So I'm no longer, because usually what I end up doing, like when I'm testing item renders, is I sit here and I actually will do that, and as you notice, that was not aimed properly. Whatever, there's supposed to be a render helper that forces you to aim with the rocket launcher. It does not look like it's working. Yeah, so there's a lot of different things we'll have to do. Will this actually render blocks too? That is so cool. I did not expect this to work so well. But yeah, so we're gonna have to do like a custom lookup system so that way when we put a sword in here or we put an axe in here, like an axe is gonna have even a different render. So if I pull another one of these out real quick and I put it down here, we don't want the axe to render like a sword because we're gonna want the axe head to be sticking in the ground. So however this impacts, so the ideal is I want whatever the most deadly point, I want that to hit the ground. So this guy might be rotated down by 45 degrees, where this guy is maybe, he's gonna have to come down all the way here. So he's gonna have to do 180 plus 45, because 45 will take him to like here. Another another 90, so it's gonna be like 135. I can test this. Also, I can recycle this method here directly. Let's go back to render fragment. So I can actually figure out my rotation in here as well. So what we can do is we can go, okay, float pitch adjust is what we're going to call this. So we'll set that to 0. And this would be added to here. So it would not be added here. Added to be here, and then we would have that that factor. This is I don't understand exactly how this factor works. It's some kind of delta factor of some kind. Like these two are delta factor. Like one of them is a delta factor, one of them is some kind of thing. Maybe a scale factor or a rotation control factor. I'll have to look it up one of these days and like actually document it properly, because I've pretty sure in the past I have figured out what these mean. I know for sure one of them, it tells you how long between each frame it is taken to run. That way, if you have a frame stutter, so you have like a frame that takes abnormally long to render, and the next one does not, or so on, you can adjust your renders so that way it looks smooth, so it doesn't look like there's actually stuttering in there. We may actually end up using that because we are probably having some render stuttering problems with the explosions when they go off. And actually, wasn't I? Yeah, I was going to actually set that off, wasn't I? Actually, I already did, didn't I? So, I don't know why I threw the explosion off the list. Kind of cool is I might do my MIRV missiles too this way. Try that again. Those go pretty far. I'm gonna have to definitely like add some weight to those so they don't fly as far. But they don't look too bad when they render. So we want our pitch adjust here, and we would go, okay, if where's the item here? So this is our item. So we're gonna put this at the very top. Item stack, item equals that. I probably should be cloning this item when I'm using it, but I'm just gonna flat use it. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go if item dot get item, and we also want to do another thing here. We're gonna go, okay, if get item doesn't equal null, then we're gonna do entity dot get item. We haven't had a problem yet where something has gone wrong with the packet system, because we're not playing around with the packet system primarily, but we want to make sure that we actually would have a backup here, so that way if the packet failed and we ended up rendering a call before, say, the packet got to the client, or we ended up rendering a call with a broken entity, we wouldn't null point in this area. Although when it comes to the actual rendering and stuff, I do have a try-catch around the display block. I do not have a try-catch on here, although I am tempted to add one at this rate, because this has crashed a few times now. So anyways, we're going to do this instance of item swords. So we're going to pretty much assume all swords are equal. This may not be the case. What I'll probably do is I'll come through with a JSON system in here, and I'll let you guys, when you make mod packs, add items to this. So that way, if you have an item you would wish to be used as a fragment, you can add it to the list and then tell me how much you want it to be adjusted by, or how you want the render to be treated. Because you might want to use the fireball render down here, or you might want to use the arrow render down here, and just change the texture, and that would be perfectly acceptable, as you may have an arrow that just does things. Anyways, so this would be pitch adjusted by, I would say, negative 135. You turned into an axe for some reason. I think the item got corrupted. Item. This is probably why I should be copying things. Set fragment material stack. Just because I feel like that's the problem, I'm going to hit copy on that, even though that's going to waste memory, but this is a development system, so wasting memory is fine. Yeah, it's something's wrong with the render system. So at some point in here, when we're rendering this, it's not resetting the item properly. And I'm not quite sure why. We're going to do a copy on this too. You're still not resetting. Why? Okay, it's like indefinitely stuck as an axe. This is the problem with development half the time, is that you break something and you're not quite sure why it's broken. But it just does what it wants to do. So I want to say at some point we've kind of screwball things. You know, I probably should be making a new entity per display. But we'd have to restart Minecraft for that. Although we might have to restart Minecraft anyways, because I think I broke something somewhere. You know, actually, I haven't hit reload at any given point, I don't think. No, I hit reload. I guess that's not it. So we're setting the fragment material down here. We're copying the stack, so we're not corrupting this guy. So you cannot corrupt this guy if you're copying it. And then we even went down in here, we're copying this guy, so we can't corrupt it again, because, well, we're using it there. And we're placing stick in if it's null. So how did it get stuck rendering an axe? Like, how? Okay, so let's just put a break line somewhere down here. Okay, so entity item thinks it is definitely using a hatchet. And we're pulling a hatchet from the... Oh, because we're recycling... Okay, I see what's the problem. It's because we're just calling entity item.getItem, and it cannot reset because... Yeah, that would definitely cause problems. Okay, so we don't need to call copy here, but I'm going to leave the copy in the other one so we don't corrupt the state of it. But we don't want to be calling copy in here all the time because of the fact that if we make a new object each frame, 60 frames pass, we make 60 objects. If you had like 100 fragments in the world all doing that, you would have made 6,000? No. Yes. I think 6,000. You would make a lot of new item stacks, and that just wastes memory. Because even though an item stack, I think, only uses like 20 bytes or something, that adds up really fast. You can waste megabytes by the time you're done. Okay, so that's there. Pitch didn't change at all. Item.getItem is instance of item sword. Yeah, it should have worked. Pitch adjust. Pitch didn't seem to change at all. Actually, yeah, I forgot. These guys like break blocks. Or that, or I'm... Creative move for the win. Takes a whole step in it. So, something's not working as expected. Because we want the entity's rotation pitch to work. Oh, it's because I think this value is 0. So that's why it doesn't work. So I want to put pitch adjust at the end. You know, if I leave this at 0, it's going to break everything. But I don't want to remove it either because it's kind of necessary. Okay, so that's what we get out of a pitch adjust. So I need to do another 90. So apparently I did my math wrong. Which doesn't make sense. I'm going to do negative 45 on this. I want to see what that gives me. It gives me straight up. Okay. So I want to do plus 45. That gives me the other direction. I think we start off at like, okay, let me drop a sword here so I can see it. Yeah, we start up to 45. Why is adding 45 go that way? I think it's because the texture is inverted. So if we actually sit here and look at it, our 0 point's going to be here, and if we go clockwise, we add 45 going that way. So we want to add another 90, so 135 should work. I just had the direction wrong. There we go. We're stayed down. We're not quite centered anymore. And I'm trying to decide if that's really a big deal that needs to be fixed. I want to say the answer is yes. But once you start messing with translation, you have to pretty much mess with everything after that. Because one, I gotta figure out how off translate I need to fix this. And then two, I gotta do the translations in a certain pattern. If we only translate the item in here, I think I can get away with it because we've already translated up here. And this would only translate the render. But then we could just translate it up here and it could work. So I need to translate the z-axis. I need to take it plus z. And we're just going to play with this just a little bit so I can just figure out how much it needs to be moved. I'm going to say like that much. That's too much. So this is where it's fun trying to mess with renders. Especially when you can't quite see them. Okay, even less than that. A good idea when you're messing with renders like this is just take it in half steps until you get close. And then once you get close, you can just start to add a little bit to it. And it's just kind of guesswork most of the time. And it also helps if you're trying to center something, try to grab something that has like a really basic shape to it that you can use to center with. I'm going to try stone bricks. Because I need some kind of contrast material behind me so I can see what the hell I'm doing. You're not a centered material, are you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I want to aim right between those two, the two lines. And I need to make sure I'm actually centered on top of that, which would help. Okay, so I wonder if this is actually just my imagination. This isn't centered properly. It would be the first time I've sat here and tried to center something, and then I found out that I was imagining things. I want to play around with the entity real quick. Okay, entity previous rotation. You know what I don't really like about the previous rotation system is that it's a piece of crap sometimes. I need to pass in 1 towards this back number, which means we got to go to our display lock. So this will be the last number, needs to be a 1. That way I can start to use rotation values, and I want to test the rotation values. And how we're going to test the rotation values, if I can jump back here. So we are pulling rotation from the actual fragment. So then we would come over to our display and we want to play around with the display here. And what we would do is we would go fragment dot rotation yaw plus equals 1. And we would go, okay, if fragment dot rotation yaw is greater than or equal to 360. So if we get to 360, we want to reset back to 0. So fragment rotation equals 0. Even though the render code can actually handle this on its own, I want to make sure that I don't have to deal with it. And what we're testing really quickly here is exactly like I thought was going to happen. So you see how it's rotating around the yaw, but the item itself is not rotating properly. This is an artifact of trying to translate and rotate something and then trying to render it. Is that our center point, which I probably should render at some point. trying to think of a good way to actually render a center point here. I'm going to think about drawing a cube real quick. Might be a good way to do it. Yeah, but we have a slight quirk in our pitch value. No, I think it's our roll. Yeah, it's our roll. It's hard to tell because pitch is going to be our side to side on that one. And we're rotating the yaw, so our roll value got screwballed somewhere here. And it's being screwballed by the fact that, well, once you start stacking rotation values, it gets really bad. Except the thing is, we're not really messing with the roll, because the roll would be rotation of the X, surprisingly. That's odd, actually, when you think about it. Something's weird here. Sometimes a really fun way to test this is just to invert the order and see what happens. As I said, there's some really fun things you can do with rotation code if you don't know what you're doing, and I clearly don't know what I'm doing. I still haven't got a great answer. I've actually asked on forums before, and I've talked to people that are actually render experts and what's the best way to do this, and I'm told a different story every time, and I think the reason I'm told a different story is everybody's render system is different. But rotation and pitch usually works really, really well with roll being the last value, and there's something definitely wrong with roll. Now you're not going to really notice it too much, especially if I turn down this rotation value, which I think is maybe the problem. Is I need to do some sine and cosine math. Is it's not as noticeable once you actually fix the rotation value. I need to render like a flat plane so we can actually see what the flat plane is doing. Because part of the problem is that we're effectively rendering this guy sideways. And the center point of the render is not perfect. Which is another issue. So I need to render like a flat quad. We're going to go borrow some code here. I'm just going to grab this bullshit. I'm going to come up here with it. That is probably not a bright idea. Actually, we're going to grab this this code. I'm just going to call that code. Do render... Well, the problem with this code is it runs the rotation code as well, so I don't know if this one works either. It's really, really hard to make code just do what you want it to do sometimes. We can do render fireball. That'll give us a good set point for where the center is, because I'm pretty sure do fireball works. So we'll do that real quick. So we're gonna let this render, and then we're gonna actually create a separate method or separate call from the inside of that. Do render fireball, and we just want to pass in the entity. Actually, I just realized I can just copy this, and of course I got a really crap scale factor on that, which I probably should upscale the fireball a little bit. But see, like, the cool thing about this is I can see where my center point is, and this will automatically always aim at me, which is really, really cool too. I actually think about making a couple entities just based on this. I like these iBoard cubes I used to make, nice big 3D cubes. I think I can get away with a really elegant looking system by just using several layers of 2D items to trick you into believing you're looking at a 3D object while saving a ton of render time. Okay, so that's our center point, even though there's some definite lighting problems. I wonder if I can fix my lighting problems. Like there's some kind of trick where I can turn off lighting. I'm trying to remember how to do it. First things first is I'm gonna wanna come over here. Right before I even call render, I'm gonna wanna do a push and a pop. How this works, by the way, for those who are still not familiar with how this works, is you're pushing stuff onto a stack and you're taking stuff off of a stack. So you push material onto the stack and then you pop it off of the stack. That way you go, okay, I want to keep hold of my previous state, and then I want to place the previous state back. That's effectively what it's saying. And I think it's render utility dot disable lighting. One tip real quick when you do rendering, don't disable blending. You can have some really bad results. Effectively, the water system in Minecraft depends on it. Aha! That works. Okay, so that's my center. The item is totally not rendering center-wise. I'm making debug code just to render my debug code. I just realized that. There's another thing I want to do real quick. I think I can call a laser render of the middle of this without it crashing. I'm trying to think of how to do it though. So what I wanted is a visual effect provider laser beam. I want this guy right down here. Save myself some trouble by actually not even having to bother using the effect provider. I can just go straight to the source. So tile dot get world, and I want to render this from the center point. So I want to make a pause object vector. So pause equals new pause tile. And then I can do this tile.add without killing my comma off there. Not tile, I need to do pause.add 0.5. So that centers the beam. And then I come over here and all I need to do is, instead of doing 0.5, I can do a 2 and 0.5 as well. New color, or actually I'm going to do color dot, yeah, I'll do red. And we want this literally to last for one tick. It's actually going to last a little bit longer just because of how this works. Did it just really import JavaFX? I know I've been working with JavaFX a lot lately, but seriously? You would think IntelliJ would be actually geared towards understanding that this is not this, and that there is definitely a difference between the two. So this will pop off a laser when I reload it here. And you probably crashed, didn't you? No? What? What? I'm confused, actually. I'm gonna say I need to take this up a little bit. That might be what's causing the problem. Yeah, it's there. Okay, so we're having a problem where it's just it doesn't last long enough. So that is literally counting frames. There we go. So we now know definitely for sure that that is our center point right there. Now we need to get the sword on the center point and rotating on the center point, which is going to be the fun part. First things first, I'm going to get rid of the pitch adjustment so we can roll that out. And I need to put something in here that is not a sword. Damn. I think I just answered my question that this is not a problem. Let's render a full 3D block. Man, that code is so nice. Okay, I think we're just running through a case where the sword is just a piece of crap. I mean this in a nice way too, because it's just... we literally want it to rotate on the hilt. So we want our center point to be on the hilt. And we need to make sure that it does things, which is tricky. So let's go back and we'll put our pitch adjustment back in here. And I think we got to do a few other things with the pitch. So we're going to have to do some sign math. Because I can deal with the roll being off because it's not as noticeable. But it's... we need to fix our X and Z here. This is done. I'm not even going to try to mental this one. I'm just going to Google it. So get point on circle by rotation. So there's like an equation for this, uses sine and cosine. I just don't remember what order they go into, even though I should. Its brain is a little slow today. Okay, so this is basically saying cos times our x, sine times it. Yeah, okay. And then we do some fun math. So we want to do float x equals math.cos. I probably should be running this through a some kind of system. This means we're going to need to grab our rotation value here. So we're going to have to change this to float ya. And I'm going to go ahead and cache my pitch too, because I have a feeling I'm going to want to process my pitch through some kind of system here later. If you've ever seen like the minecarts and stuff, they actually have a special way of handling some of their pitch and yaws. That way shit doesn't break. I probably should spend more time actually looking into how their code works, because I realized I actually do need to work on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this to basically our radius, which we found to be 0.1 to work rather well. So set to 0.1f. And the reason I'm using float, by the way, is it's just a smaller unit size, so it's a little nicer. Even though we're probably going to end up with a double anyways, because, well, kind of sometimes hard to avoid. And that should be... I believe this works for... You could use this for your pitch as well if you wanted to. We're just going to use it for this. It's not perfect. Like, if I actually recall right, I usually have to toy with this a lot. And these are going to end up as doubles anyway, so I think I'm just going to switch to a double data type. I really wish there was actually a math method that used a float, because I don't really need high precision. Anyways, this is how you fix it though. I've used a lot of math like this in the past. When I did laser guns and stuff that have to shoot a laser, I use this kind of math, because you have to rotate the laser start position around the player in order to get it to render properly. And this is how you know your math is broken. Because that shouldn't happen. Math helper.clamp. Okay, hold on. Make sure I'm using the right math helper. I want to make sure this is clamped to 360. And I'm going to do the same thing with the pitch. That's the reason I said I may have to go do this anyways, is that this is inevitable that I'm going to have to adjust things. That should provide for a little nicer render. No. Oh, I remember. I need to turn my yaw value to radians. Math.to radians. Yeah. The value is just too high. It's basically what I just made a mistake on. And this does need to be a double for precision, so I'll change that. And I should make a math helper for this, because the number of times I've used this, I really should just make a math helper for this. Still funky. Something's not right. So cosine, sine, cosine, sine, cos, x rotation. We're doing the yaw. Clamp to 180 maybe. Radians are weird, so I know either one of these systems, by the way, will work properly, so it doesn't matter. The render code can handle both of them just fine. That's making no difference. We're still vibrating. Very strange too. It basically means we're getting non-consistent results, and I just spotted why. That needs to be a plus. Well, I can't tell if it's wrong because it almost feels like it's actually physically orbiting. It's definitely broken. That much I can tell. Okay, so I'm gonna say we're just gonna put this as a 1 value, and I want to see what it does. You are totally not working. You provide for a rather interesting effect that I may definitely have to like use later. It's one of those cool things when you get broken effects, they actually do kind of work. Try to decide what is actually causing this though. Because theoretically, you know what, we're gonna cheat here. And what I mean by cheat is we're gonna do something like that. I want to know how broken you are. Okay, so definitely want to take this to 0.1 now. Probably some conversion problems, maybe. Okay. Point 1 is not going to work. 0.05. Okay, so 90 degrees. That's close. Like, what if I legitimately take this to 0? If I take this to 0, by the way, I'll end up with, like, basically nothing. It's slightly off to one side. So there's definitely a need for this to be here in order to fix the centering. It's just, we're getting... Oh, I just realized my mistake. Okay, so... something I was not paying attention to is that this is actually set up to use 2 coordinates, not just 1. And there's a reason why it uses 2 coordinates, is because I only want to rotate. This is the reason why it's vibrating, by the way. I don't want to rotate actually they give a great example here. If you want to rotate 3, 0, you only want to rotate the 3, not 3, 3. I was basically rotating by 3, 3. So this should fix it because I don't want to rotate anything in the Z. Well, actually, I do want to rotate the Z coordinate. I don't want to rotate anything in that direction. So we'll take us back to 0. We'll fix it for the 0 rotation. And then we'll get the value correct. Let me set these both to 0. Not 5, because that would just throw my item like way off the edge of the screen. Huh. Apparently I need to fix in the X direction. That's odd. I mean, I'll take what I get. Okay, so we want it to go over a little bit more, so 1 might be it. Okay, it looks like it's sitting perfectly in the center now. There we go. And we made me to do this per item, by the way, so if I switch over to like arrow, yeah, it's not quite right. I mean, you're not going to do it. Oh yeah, so it's going to break per rocket launcher. So we may need to like adjust this per item. So yeah, it definitely looks like it's what's going to happen. So what we're going to do is... I'm trying to decide like the best path to take for this. So I think what I want to do is I want to put this in here. Then I want to take these two values, put them up here, and we'll treat them just like they're the pitch adjustment values. So we'll basically say, okay, these are just initialized to like 0 or something. We're going to calculate our yaw early. We're going to, well, we're not going to set this. Oh, well, we can't calculate our yaw early. Shoot. I have a plan. Okay. We'll do it this way. Take that. Come down here. So we're going to get rid of this. Make sure X is initialized to 0. Then we're going to take this guy and we're going to go math helper. Make sure we're using my math helper. Clamp to 360, which we really shouldn't be doing during render time, but it works. It'll prevent graphical glitches, and if we seriously take a performance hit for it here later, I'll do some debug profiling on it, and I'll figure out how long it actually takes, and I'll see if I can adjust it, because it could be like we take a performance hit and there's just no alternative to this. Like it's needed to make sure that these guys are not screwing with the render code, and oh yeah, I can't actually reload. So we're gonna use this for that. So change pitch. Everybody releasing their videos in the morning. So we're going to rename this, guys, to X adjust. And the same thing with the Z. So that way we know what these are. Make sure we also set this fix missing render manager. Get item. We actually don't need this guy anymore. Update fake item for rendering. Calc rotation. Adjustment data per item. Just for sword. To do, move to JSON. That will be a reminder for later. Render item. We can break this down even further. So this is actually the render item using and then basically the rest of it is just your end caps and stuff. So that's your end cap, set rotation values, translate. It's really nice to kind of document your code, even though this stuff seems to be redundant to have to put the stuff here. It breaks up your code visually, so it's a lot easier to read. So even though the stuff like it's like, oh, that's obviously a translate thing, but you see the break between them makes the eyes track that stuff much nicer. And then of course it also, if like I'm brain dead while I'm going through this, it'll help a lot. So now that should fix basic stuff rendering. Of course we've restored the normal stuff, and let's go ahead and put the sword back in there. And of course we got vibrating still. I was so hopeful that that was going to work. Why? It's not working properly, which tells me something's still wrong. Oh, wait. I typed the wrong method in. Oh, that looks so cool. It's not centered because I fucked the radians up, but that's so cool. Probably because this one is actually what needs to be done, and this one just needs to go to 0. No, that's not it. Let me set this. Let me set the rotation back to 0 again, and we'll readjust it. So yeah, that needs to be. That still needs to be X. Just something's not right. So that needs to be 0. Watch this be 0.5 again. So that's perfect. And then let me check if the Z rotation is good. I mean, it looks fine. It's not centered perfectly, actually. So I think 0.1 is actually better. Okay, that looks good. That's why I don't do render code often. And then of course we have a problem with the roll not being correct. And as I said, I don't really care to mess with it too much, because trying to get the roll to play nicely with everything else is a little tricky. I wonder if we have the same problem if like we stick... Does it have a roll issue with it? It does look like it is having a rotation problem. It's really... I can't tell whatsoever. I don't think there is a roll problem with it, but there's definitely an issue there. And I'm pretty sure it's the fact that we're doing a pitch adjust to it, but you would think if we were having a pitch rotation like that to start with, we would end up with bullcrap like that to start with it altogether. I don't want to apply a roll to this, but I will actually set one up just so we can test it. Because once you put roll on an item set, the rolls for rotation kind of change a little bit. And the reason I say this is because I had to add special code to my JSON render system just to correct for roll breaking. And let's just apply roll, and okay, it didn't change at all. So I want to see if we can just actually make the roll go away, because my OCD is bothering me that badly. Okay, so that increases it, so we want to go negative roll. Okay, 10 degrees is too much. But this is where, like, when I'm talking about roll messing with things, there's a slight mess up with the pitch. It's really hard to notice. But we're sitting here and we're staring, well, it should be at 0 degrees when we're looking at this direction, and I can see the edge of it now. It's adjusting a lot of the other values in the process. It's the reason I don't like messing with roll. It's also, I think, why you're supposed to apply roll before everything else. Let me try that. It might fix it. Actually, it might have worked. We'll have to see what happens. Okay, so probably like 5. We'll play with it a little bit more. It's not quite working. It's like a 2 degree mess up too. It's really strange. I want to blame like Minecraft code for this, to be honest. There's a slight tweak in the yaw rotation, but that looks okay. So it is centered now, so let me get rid of this and we'll see if it still vibrates. If it still vibrates, then I don't know what's up. I think I need to invert the two values because we're getting like a constant X move on that one. I think what I want to do is I want to put I just want to get this value back. And then times it by my values here. So times by fix X and times by fix Z. Try that. Better result. We're having, is the item bobbing up and down? That's giving us like a diagonal pattern that's going that way. That's not an improvement. One of the things we could try to do is switch these two values. I doubt that will fix it because I think it's just going to invert our pattern. It's definitely bobbing up and down. Oh no! If I put you in here, okay, you're rotating perfectly fine. So it's not bobbing up and down because there's actually a bobbing feature that items have. If you render them within the item system, they'll bob up and down. Hold on. Options, video settings. Yeah, I have mine turned on. So that's not working either. Let me, where's the Google page? Google. So coast minus sine, sine minus coast. I mean, the math is right. The usage of our math may not be right. So it'd be x minus the center x. That ends up with 0. Times 0 minus center. Okay, that's like confusing. I want to get a little bit other. You know, why can't there ever just be a simple explanation? Well, yeah, it's just cos minus sine is what we use to get this. And then sine plus cos, which looks right. Yeah, we're still getting this weird oscillation pattern that I'm trying to decide if it's actually being caused by the code we're trying to use to adjust it. Let me just comment this stuff out and see how our item behaves without it. Yeah, so there's definitely a need for it there. We really just need to bring it in a couple, but it's not quite working. Because we're definitely getting an oscillation where it's moving in and then back out. Plus that rule is not really fixing things. That kind of was working. Now it's kind of not doing squat. I've had this problem before. Let's try actually making this circular again. Okay, it makes it rotate around a circle. I wonder what happens if I just add slightly different behavior. It kind of is working. It's really hard just to notice. It's, wow. Not really working. Let's try Z direction. Okay, I need this thing to stay still. Try to adjust it first and then try to rotate it again. Okay, Z is definitely not the direction it needs to be fixed. This is where I'm pretty sure the cosine and sine method was actually, it's the correct approach, is because I need to adjust it per axis or per quadrant is how it works. So that's the rotation I want, is 0.1 in the X adjustment. But if I turn rotation back on, it's not going to work because it has to be done each quadrant. But when we do each quadrant, we don't get a good rotation value. Actually, let's go put that back in and then get rid of that, and we put this back. And we're not ending up with at all what we want it to work as. Let's actually invert a couple times here. So I want that old piece of code back that was predates me trying to screw with it. Where we had this. Okay, there we go. Because I think I was on the right track with this spot. Okay, that's orbiting a fixed point. So we don't want it to orbit a fixed point. We're trying to adjust by a certain amount. It's just not doing what it needs to do. That doesn't change the behavior whatsoever. It's still like basically darting back and forth on the X. So I get back up here, yeah, it's going back and forth on the X. We're not getting any Z variation on it. It's only changing the X direction. And if I switch the two, it'll then do the same exact thing on the Z direction. I think what I want is something closer to this. Apparently that's the part that's working. The other half apparently wasn't doing squat, so we know this now. That's why it keeps doing just X only. So how this should work is this should go between 0 and 1 if I recall right. And then you pass in between 0 and 1 to these. And they give you back a value that's practically between 0 and 1 if I something like that. And then you times that by the value. So let's try... No, that won't work either. Because the thing is, like, the fixed z is 0. So if we know this is going to be 0, anything that's got the fixed z part on it is just not going to give us a result. So this is the only part that's going to give us a result. The issue is this part's not doing anything, which is very strange. It should do something. But what we're seeing is that it's going back and forth between the x direction. So the x part, so this line is the only thing that's actually getting any type of value, which is very odd because this should at least return something. I should see at least some variation in the z-axis, but I'm not. If we stand exactly here and we watch it, it's really hard to tell. So if we actually come down and we turn off all the rotation down here and we just focus on just the translation factor. Oh, I just broke the block because derpiness is high. It is actually rotating around the block. Huh. I want to have my pitch value back because this is important to have that pitch value. Just don't apply the roll. So that actually is rotating, but I guess we weren't noticing it. Things just get stranger and stranger the more I screw with this code. So this should be 0.1f. This should be 0. So if we do this, what happens? You work perfectly fine. Now, if I turn the yaw rotation back on, you now all suddenly rotate around that point. Kind of. I wonder if I put the 0.1 right here and remove it here from here, what will happen? You just kind of invert it on yourself. And if we make it negative, aha! We've discovered something. Science is strong with this one. So we want to put our x adjust down here then, and then we want to put our z adjust down here. So we can adjust these guys, and we can get rid of our whole bullshit system we were working on. So like this is the right approach to take. It's just something is not working properly. It is causing the system to not function appropriately. Let's go ahead and reapply the roll on top of that to see what happens. It works. So we got our system working now, and that's acceptable-ish. Take us to like a 1 value. Okay, I need to take it like a 3, so go the other direction. I hate messing with roll. Like there's literally videos of me sitting here just screwballing with roll that I have not uploaded because I spent like 6 hours just trying to fix a render. And we're already on like an hour 20, and I know nobody's going to watch this video too, but that works. So if I actually sit here and fire this off now. If I got any projectiles out of that, they're too small. I need a bigger rocket. Click. I got hit by one of those two. So they're all on fire too, which doesn't help the situation whatsoever. Because I cannot see them. Where? I need to probably fix the fire code. It seems to be like everything sets on fire now. All kinds of random rotations. I mean it's working. It's just the results are not satisfactory. So we put a lot of effort in just to figure out that the fragment code itself is not providing good, clean results. So I mean, we see them fling out there, and then we see them kind of spaz out as they fly through the air. I don't like the looks, so I might have to go test pitch here in a second. Okay, so the next step, we see we're testing yaw here, is that we would want to test pitch. So we go over to block display, same spot we do this. We're going to copy this exact piece of code, except we're going to change how it functions. So this would be pitch, this would be pitch, and take this piece of code. And every time we do a full rotation, we're going to do a rotation on the pitch. Except we're going to speed both these up, because I want to see the item move at a much faster speed. This tells us if there's something wrong with the rotation, by the way. It's because we'll see it go through all the cycles. Pitch. Ideally, what I would like to have is some kind of debug render here that would tell you which direction the pitch is aiming in. I could actually do that with lasers and a little bit of quantarian math, and it would not be too bad. Oh, it looks fine. So it's just a fragment system that's actually causing the problems. So if we fire this again and we sit here and watch it, which is getting really tedious in my opinion, but so we can watch. I mean, they really spaz out. So there's something weird going on. Because I mean, they absolutely tweak when they're firing. I'm not sure what's causing that, to be honest. Because if we go to the actual render fragment, which is the code we've been spending all this time working on, there's nothing in here that would cause behavior like that unless it's like this method or this system right there. We could say we don't give shits about previous rotation, which I don't know if we really care about on a lot of these. That could be like what I'm not noticing is that a lot of the render code that's designed to do this doesn't care about previous rotation to start with, and our previous rotation system may be broken. So let's take a look at Fireball's a good way to look at this because it doesn't do anything fancy. It literally just gets the player's point of view. So I'm going to say if we get rid of this, get rid of that, and we're just going to test this too. If this turns out to be worse than what we started with, I'm going to invert it back because there is a reason why that code exists there. It's meant to smooth out the render values, but if it is what's causing these to look really janky when they fly through the air, it might be worth dropping them then. No, they still spaz really hard. I don't know what's causing the spazzing. It may just be how the fragments are coded. We may have to end up like implementing a projectile system for this. I'm not too far against that because I can just port this code over. And I just realized I took the code out of the wrong spot. Coffee would be definitely something I probably should have drank by now, but I'm actually just trying to run myself out of energy right now so I can get some sleep, which is might not happen today. That seems to be a consistent habit too. I'm fumbling today. So really we just want rotation plus or minus, and this one we just want like rotation. Here we go. Try this again and not screwball the code. Mouse. Oh, come on, mouse. Work. There we go. Okay. A lot of fire. I'm probably going to say if it's like a projectile type, I'm going to stop using fire on it. And that actually looked a lot nicer. Yeah, let's go ahead and get rid of the fire effect, and that's going to be an entity. I'm trying to think of like where this actually is. Handle block collision. So that's where it sets it on. So it goes okay, is replaceable, etc. And it goes okay, is on fire and next Boolean. It's probably the explosion code itself that does the set fire part. Fire, fire, smoke. I think this is the part that actually is like really lagging the game out. Maybe. Oh no, not this part. I need to really focus, and I'm having terrible times doing that. Okay, here's where the blast code is. And yeah, this system, by the way, was switched over to an item system, so we pretty much can run anything through this now. And what we want to do is we want to go, okay, if fragment type is solely a certain type of material, so we want to go, okay, if fragment.getType equals fragment type.block. So we want to say, okay, if you're a block only, do we want to have fire on you? Because I don't want to deal with this anymore where it's doing this. That way I can see these guys actually hit the ground for once. And we might be able to see them stick in the ground. Okay, it looks like they die instantly when they hit the ground, so this is another thing we probably want to work on. I wanted to fix the tooltip there. Get rid of that. And then we'll fix the fragments. So the fragments probably got some like on hit ground die. This one sets TNT. I forgot that it actually works that way. So there's probably like on impact tile in ground 20 plus next random hit. We would probably say like that you can stay there longer than that. I gotta figure out. There's probably like a piece of code that actually says that if it's not a certain type of block, it dies instantly. I'm not seeing that kind of code. So it's in ground ticks that's going off. I'm trying to see like if there's another piece of code. Like there's a set dead. If it's a blaze and it hits ground, it dies instantly. Okay, so I don't see any other code that does that, unless I'm missing something. I'm gonna say we want to make a new world real quick. Create new world. Frag test. More world options. Yeah, we'll do super flat again. Even though I probably should do like a more interesting looking world. A super flat will do the trick. So this is the missile we want. It doesn't really matter which one. I notice they're all rendering as just iron sword for some reason. It might be my bad, I think. Yeah, I think I messed the enum up, and I can fix that later. There's an enum that actually keeps track of like what items to use for each fragment. Okay, so try again. We shouldn't see fire everywhere this time. Okay, so we are seeing swords. Ah, they are sticking out of the ground. It's just they're really disappearing quickly. I'm not sure why, because they should stick around. Because the ticking ground thing is 300 ticks max. That's like 5 seconds. That does make sense. So what we want to do is we actually want to toy with the fragment code a little bit more. Click here. Okay, so we want to say if get fragment type equals fragment type dot projectile, or rather fragment type dot actually blaze don't stick around, they just set everything on fire. We want to say, okay, if it's not block type, Then we want to go, okay, in-ground ticks. And we want to say, okay, there's 20 ticks in a second. I want to see him stick around for another 100 seconds. Shouldn't provide too much of an issue. Because I want to see how these look. They're just, like, instantly disappearing. Oh, I see a couple here. So now we got swords sticking out of the ground. We're getting a little vibration out of them. I definitely think there's actually something as part of the code that is doing this. And I think what is happening is, like, we're seeing the collision boxes themselves. Oh, look. They all poked out of the ground for whatever reason. I don't know why. I'm confused by what that happened there that caused that to happen. I think it's a render glitch because clearly they look like they should be pointing straight down. There's some vibration going on for odd reasons. And the render position seems to be, well, it's consistent-ish. We want to offset it a little bit more here. And they all seem to switch to that rotation. So there might be something wrong with the rotation code here. There's definitely a problem with that. Actually, the render position being on the hilt is perfectly fine, actually. Because if we do it further down, we may have to adjust how the render functions, or how the positioning functions. So there's a lot of code that would need to go into play to make these interesting. I could make it work though. I just would have to play around with it. But I'm going to call that into this episode because we accomplished what we wanted to do. And essentially we've got like really pretty renders for our items now because they got this nice 3D look to them. And they look pretty good. So yeah, Anvil's next after this and a few other things.